We, of course, being that this is a traditional thing that we're starting, as we all know, we only need one instance of anything where it becomes a tradition, at least in my mind. Important things like birthday stories and Citrona and stuff. So we have put together a little tale that we would like to relate to for Ashley. And of course, since this is all about Ashley, we expect you to laugh at the story we've created.
Once upon a time, far away, in a land of chocolate and short men with goatees, there lived a princess.
Her name was Ashley, and she lived in a beautiful palace where portions were small, chocolate was plentiful, vegetables were virtually non-existent, and the leaves really never quite made it in from the plant garden outside. The garden plants didn't like this. It made them bitter. Especially the peas.
One night, all the vegetables in the neglected, bitter, slowly putrefying garden called a special enclave. They decided it was time to take serious action.
They decided to summon the head cabbage. The onions objected, as usual, but the asparagus' smooth rhetoric won over the tomatoes, and that was the end of it. The kohlrabi remained silent, biding their time.
No one knew exactly how the kidnapping took place. Vegetables keep their secrets. And anytime anyone worked up the courage to ask the princess later, she just turned slightly green and fainted. This usually discouraged any further inquiry.
The next thing the princess knew, she was incarcerated in the proverbial tower, under the mostly careful watch of a 6'8" German whose formidableness was constantly undermined by the fact that he had a great sense of humor and was very amiable and spoke good English. But she was forced to deslug lettuce for hours on end. And at mealtimes, it was nothing but green peas covered with very un-American American hamburger sauce.
It was indeed a dire situation.
Meanwhile, back at the palace, things were accelerating to a state of crisis. The king was away negotiating an expensive and expansive trade agreement with the moguls of British Sport, and the queen had been at the hairdresser's for the past 3 weeks, and nobody really knew when she'd be back. The prime minister had the mumps, and the second minister was, frankly, incompetent. The pressure was mounting, and the masses were growing restless.
The second minister finally decided he had to take action. After all, it is pretty bad PR when the princess of the country gets captured and nobody has a clue where she is. The minister staged a heroic discovery and rescue involving the blacksmith, butcher, the beggar, and the town crier. All very preposterous and thrown together, but people will believe anything these days, what with all the traveling minstrels that tell their tales. And the plan worked. At that time, only a handful of people actually knew what the princess looked like, for she was about to be one of the royal debutantes at the upcoming spring ball. When the new faux princess would make her few public appearances, people would just remark that she was not as pretty as they would have expected, and then go their merry way.
By the time the king and queen returned, they could do nothing. The new princess was already established. You know, all it takes is one slip, and the rabble-rousers of the kingdom start clamoring for a new king. People are so unforgiving these days.
That's when Tim decided to take action.
You haven't heard about Tim? Well.
Tim was the IT guy at the palace. The princess never really noticed him. He was just the person who fixed the alarm clocks and sometimes interrupted her net surfing to install some more memory. But one day her power cord went bad and she rang the bell for a new one, and Tim was sent to replace it. The princess was sitting at her desk when he came to plug it in. She glanced down. He glanced up. Their eyes met.
No one seemed to notice that the princess mouse seemed to malfunction much more often after that. Or that the palace network always seemed to go down. Seemed to go down a lot more often than it used to. Or that the princess seemed to suddenly want to know the intricate workings of Microsoft Excel. Then Microsoft Word. Then Microsoft Access. And as the princess became even more desperate, Minesweeper.
This is a classic. If the brothers Grimm had been able to get the rights to the story, they would have had a heyday.
When Tim finally found out what had finally happened to the princess, the cook finally blabbed. It took him about the space of 1 heartbeat to decide he must rescue her. And he was off, faster than a T1 line.
It was long and arduous. It led him through Germany, Switzerland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Italy, France, Poland, Russia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Romania, Greece, Hungary, Bulgaria, Liechtenstein, Austria, and the Netherlands.
Meanwhile, the princess was still imprisoned in the tower. She had packaged and vacuum sealed 125 kilos of kohlrabi and released another album. But as she stood there in her prison, and she knew that if anyone could save her, it would be Tim.
There were many perils on Tim's journey, including uncooked bacon and pickup soccer games with Germans. But Tim endured all the way to the still proverbial tower, which was getting more and more proverbial all the time.
All it took was 1 Fuddrucker burger to bribe the guard, and Tim and his princess were reunited with passionate air hugs and high fives. Then they had to make the journey home.
They came to a lake guarded by a monster with 27 heads, and they debated what to do.
Then they came to a raging lava pit, and they debated what to do.
Then they came to a mountain pass guarded by a horde of menacing paper cranes, and they debated what to do.
Then they came to a river, and they debated what to do.
Then they were assailed by a group of human rights activists who tried to get them to join a lobbyist organization, and they just simply waved and moved on.
They moved on until they came to the palace. It was in the middle of a garden party. People were milling about, drinking Apfelschorle and Ovomaltine, and eating little tomatoes with mozzarella cheese, and listening to the dulcet strains of a troubadour harp and a very small but very adequate soprano.
The soprano, however, happened to be a very close friend of the real princess. They spent a lot of time together at a youth hostel in the Alps. So of course the prima donna ran to embrace the princess.
And that's when the melee started. Nobody can remember exactly how. Some people said the harp girl knocked over a stack of coffee cups. Some people said that the blind guy in the corner had a little bit too much Apfelschorle in his head. But be that as it may, there was a lot of general yahooing.
The yahooing was interrupted by the princess herself. Talking through an improvised megaphone made out of pine cones, don't ask, she stilled the crowd with some carefully chosen attention-getting words and declared herself to be the real princess in a speech that was a model of extemporaneous rhetoric. She analyzed and adjusted to her speaking situation. She made her delivery vital and kept it free from distracting elements. Her character, knowledge, and judgment commanded respect.
The crowd roared.
6 guys randomly broke into song.
And somebody shrieked, "I should!"
The king was so overjoyed that Tim was knighted and given an honorary MBA. They were married shortly after.
And if they hadn't died, they would be still living today.